This is The Download from Sounds Profitable, your daily source for the essential news in the business of podcasting. I'm Gavin Gaddis. Here's what you need to know for today, Thursday, May 29th. First up, the podcasting advertising anomaly, new research on attention and gender. This is by Tom Webster. The next chapter of data from the advertising landscape will focus specifically on podcast advertising's performance in regards to attention and trust. One bit of data that stands out to Webster is evidence there is, nearest makes no difference, no gender gap in podcast advertising recall. Male podcast listeners surveyed for the advertising landscape clocked in at 86% recall on podcast ads, while female listeners scored 85%. A quote-unquote gap so small that statistically it might as well be a rounding error. For comparison, AM/FM radio scored an 11-point gap between the two measured genders, and cable TV had a 5-point gap. Reddit, for comparison, has a sizable 24-point gap. Following up, Webster also has a new LinkedIn article, also linked in the newsletter today, digging into that 11-point gap for radio and what that gap means for advertising mediums, as well as what makes podcasting unique, having closed that gap. Next up, Spotify updates podcast discovery features. Changes to the app include a new podcast recommendation area that's underneath users' shortcuts on the home screen of Spotify. In addition, the podcasting area of Spotify now has a second feed users can swap to, which filters to only posts from shows they're following. Over the coming weeks, they also intend to roll out a new global feature called In This Episode, where creators can list out content mentioned within that particular podcast episode that also appears on Spotify. For example, songs discussed or an audiobook that was reviewed. That will then create a carousel in the episode on Spotify that listeners can click on to directly access that media. Next up, 2025 Annual Marketing Report. Nielsen has published their marketing report for the year, built from a survey of 1,400 leading marketers around the world. In the macro, we've got stats like 54% of global marketers plan to reduce ad spend this year, and 48% of North American marketers prioritize revenue growth and brand awareness equally. Focusing down to specifically podcasting, 16% of advertisers surveyed plan on increasing their podcast budgets by over 50% this year. That's down 2% from 2024's version of this report. The report anticipates new budgets will predominantly go to digital channels throughout the year, but not at the same rate as last year, as investment in traditional channels is expected to climb. Next up, Horizon Media opens public RFP to drive transparent ad tech partnerships. The request for information and proposal process has kicked off to build a partner network for its Blue marketing platform with a focus on keeping the process transparent. Horizon Media President Bob Lord says this will also allow them to show the rationale behind selections, eliminating the possibility of ad tech decisions motivated by outside incentives or kickbacks. And for a final top story, Car to Drive comedy podcast for Netflix. Let me have just one joke today. As covered in The Hollywood Reporter and Deadline, BBC Studios has teamed up with Netflix to produce The Big Pitch with Jimmy Carr. The podcast is a branded comedy series in which comedians pitch Carr on the movie idea of their choosing that is specifically tailored to fit one of Netflix's 27,000 plus hyper niche genres. For example, one of those many subgenres is Australian dysfunctional family comedies starring a strong female lead. While Netflix has a healthy stable of podcasts, I've linked to the To Dumb list of podcasts on the newsletter version today. They have a healthy stable of podcasts and have had that for several years now. They tend to be official tie-ins of popular Netflix properties, redistributing existing content, or chat shows about Netflix properties. The Big Pitch is a step in the direction of getting a comedy show on the charts with a branded element baked into the premise. As for the rest of the news, the Tribeca Film Festival, which is just under 2 weeks away, has their full 2025 lineup posted, which includes a section specifically for audio storytelling, featuring events from a live taping of This American Life, Excellence in Audio Journalism Gala, to a live episode recording of Talk Easy, with the guest being Sam Rockwell. Space is limited, tickets are cheap, you should check it out. Again, you'll hear where in the end of the episode as usual. Speaking of things you can sign up for, PRX, in partnership with KUT and The Drag Audio, is hosting a multi-day podcast summit in Austin from June 16th through the 18th. In addition to that, they'll be hosting a creative design workshop where selected applicants will gather to brainstorm, collaborate, and prototype a new podcast idea over the course of 3 mornings. Applications are open now. Acast has launched a new search engine powered by OpenAI's LLM, aiming to enable advertisers to find podcast audiences they want by simply describing who they want to reach to the LLM, after which smart recommendations will act like an AI media planner and build out a list of applicable podcasts. BBC Sounds and Audible have teamed up with Crossed Wires to sponsor the 2-day podcast festival based in Sheffield, which starts on July 4th. The resulting collaboration includes live recordings of popular BBC properties and several Audible-sponsored events, such as a live show where broadcaster Greg James will attempt to convince Monty Python star Michael Palin to start a podcast. Wondercraft has announced a new customization for their generative AI voice clones that allow users to shape the automated voice's accent, sound, and even ask it to mimic the vocal patterns of another voice. Dear Media has become the new home of parenting podcast After Bedtime with Big Little Feelings, hosted by Kristen Gallant and Dina Margolin. AdTonos and Number 8 have announced a new partnership that will marry AdTonos' ad-serving tech with Number 8's ID-less audience solutions. And finally, TubeFilter covers the new show 100 CEOs with Stephen Bartlett, an animated series where Bartlett discusses 10 lessons audiences can learn from entrepreneurial inspiration, with the animation and voiceover being produced with generative AI tools based on a script Bartlett writes. Be sure to check out the links to every article mentioned right in your podcast listening app or at soundsprofitable.com, where you can also subscribe to the newsletter version. The download is written and produced by myself, Brian Barletta, and Tom Webster. For Sounds Profitable, I'm Gavin Gaddis. We're almost through the week. I'll see you one more time tomorrow for the download recap.